Hello guys, welcome to another video. In today's video I'm going to give you 4 stories to show you how difficult medical training in Nigeria can be, and these 4 stories are pertaining to our oral exams. We call it Viva, and then clinicals we call it the clinical exams. You're going to have a live interview with your tutors, and most times they are foreign examiners, although sometimes it could be the teachers in your school. But for others, you're going to be interviewed or you're going to be questioned by medical doctors that are teachers in other med school. They travel to come over. This is good for standardization so that all the medical students should reach a particular standard to pass or fail. So 4 stories, 2 are my stories and 2 are from other colleagues of mine. So let's dive into today's video. Medical training and exams in Nigeria is very hard and it's quite subjective. Initially, before the OSCE was being introduced, OSCE made it more objective, but then when it was quite subjective, you could pass or fail just by an examiner liking or not liking based on first impressions or something. So you could make a mistake and from then everything goes south. It's sad because you pass or fail not based on your knowledge but based on some particular sentiments. Today's video would help you understand. It will give you a taste as to how some of these sentiments really play some factors in us. Guys will tell you that when they pass is God. It's because you hear some people's stories and you're happy that you didn't go through it, and you hear some people's story and you wish it was you. 2 of these stories are mine and 2 are not mine, so I'm going to arrange them in this way. I'll start with one of my stories, and then the second will be another person's story, the third will be another person's story, and then I end up with my story. I know you're going to enjoy this, and I'll try to be improving my storytelling abilities. So the first story. This happened during my final year exams in surgery. Medicine has some certain rules, some certain etiquette, and this is what happens during clinical exams. There are long cases and there are short cases. So this was a long case. The long case scenario is that you're giving a patient to clerk within a particular set of time. After you've clerked the patient, you've taken the history, you've done your examination, you've done everything, then your examiners come in and they ask you questions. You present the history of the patient and your examination findings, and they probe you. That's how we learn to take history so that we're able to arrive at diagnosis. We're being taught all this in medical school, and if they're satisfied, you pass. And you should know this, that in med school, there's the written parts and there's the clinical part. In preclinics, there's the written part and then there's the viva or the oral. They're almost similar, but the clinical part is more of within the hospital settings. No matter how well you do in the written part, if you don't pass the clinical part, that's all for you. So the clinical skills are very important. So back to the story. While I was still clerking this patient, my examiners walked in as I was yet to finish writing down whatever I was writing. And I didn't learn how to write these things fast. And unfortunately, the registrar or the resident doctor overseeing my own part of the exams decided to keep the examiners. There were 3 examiners. He decided to keep the examiners' seats on the right side of the patient. While I was writing, at the foot of the bed, there's usually a table that you keep charts and other things, so that you see, that was what I was using to write when this registrar kept 3 chairs on the right side of the patient, and they just walked in and sat. So the left side was empty, and the thing is this, there's one rule, I don't know whether it has changed now, let me know if it has changed, is that when you're presenting patients, you always stand on the right side of the patient. Don't ever present on the left side. Even when you're examining a patient, you stand on the right side of the patient. So if this wasn't really into me, especially in exam settings that you can get very, very anxious, I would have just stood on the left side, and irrespective of how I presented the patient, I had already failed the exams. This kind I have failed the exams because these are some basic rules that are very important to our teachers then. So what I did was that they occupied the entire right side though. I just stood, I greeted them and went behind them and tried to tuck myself close to the wall so that I would stand at the right side of the patient. Then the chief examiner, the most senior doctor amongst them, just looked at the other people and was like, this young man has told us to move. Oh. And that's how these two carried their chairs, their seats, and moved to the left side. And then I was able to present the patient. And I looked at it and I was really worried, not during the exams, in retrospect. I was like, so if I didn't know this, that's how I failed these exams. And for someone that had failed a couple of times in med school, this was going to be a very painful experience. So yes, it's that subjective. I'm telling you, it's that subjective. Small mistake and you miss it. A friend failed O and G because he missed an old CS car, and the CS car was, the person that did the surgery could really do it. This car was very minimal and he missed it. Because of that, he failed the exams and had to resit for it again. Luckily and thankfully, he passed during the second sitting. So that's how serious things are in the exams. So it's beyond you preparing. Many times, some of these things can happen and then you fail. So next time you hear that the medical student fail, it's not because major of the person's done. Many things happen, especially with the old set of exams then. Thank God for our skill. The second story happened during our pre-clinics. It was during physiology exams. It was a viva exams. And a friend of mine, I know him very well. In fact, I had asked for his permission before I shared the story. He was meeting a particular, before our exams, before we have the viva, we're shared into different groups, and each group will meet a particular set of interviewers or a particular set of examiners. So the guy was in a group that they had a particular examiner, and what happens is that when anybody that goes into for viva comes out, it's usually in an office. So when the person goes and have his own viva and comes out, the people waiting will be asking, what did they ask, what did they ask, so that they will have an idea of what is going to be asked. Medical knowledge is so vast that you wouldn't know what you will be asked, and it could be that the only thing you didn't read would have been what they will ask, and sometimes the only thing you read could be what could be asked from you. So this particular guy, when he was entering for his own interview, luckily for him, someone had already given me a hint of what the man was asking, and it was physiology. The man was very interested in the digestive system. And FYI, carbohydrate digestion is easier to memorize than the other nutrients. It's unforgivable for you to not know the carbohydrate and then know the other one. So carbohydrate was something we really focused on. And those other ones are a bit tricky, you might miss it, but that carbohydrate thing was quite straightforward. So most guys knew it at the tip of their fingers. So what happened was that when he was being called in, the examiner was very polite. They exchanged some pleasantries, and then the examiner asked him that, what did you have for breakfast today? And my colleague said, yam, which is carbohydrate. And he said, okay. What else did you have? He just said, just yam. He said, no, you didn't have it with any soup, or you mixed it with anything? Also, he said, no. What did you take? He just insisted, yam. And what? Yam and water. And because he knew where the examiner was trying to lead him to, because the examiner would know that this guy will understand carbohydrates. So maybe you should mention something like beans, so that we'll talk about protein, or fish, or whatsoever like that, so that we'll go towards that. This man insisted on that yam thing. I think they didn't ask him anything outside carbohydrate. So yes, it's a fight. Like, you have to insist, stand your ground. Be smart about it. Don't go and be doing I do know like this. And one of the most, let me give you a choice, one of the most risky situations they can put you in during Viva is when an examiner asks you, what should I ask you? Be very careful the kind of answer you give, because if you suggest a question and you're being asked and you fail to answer, you're likely going to fail the exams, because if you can't answer the question you set for yourself, what makes you think you can answer the ones that they will set for you? That was smarter, and he's doing well as a medical doctor. That's it. Now the next, which was a miraculous one, still during preclinicals, it was a Viva setting 2. He was a senior colleague of ours. He came in for the Viva and met the examiner alone. And after they exchanged pleasantries, the examiner asked him the first question. Our guy didn't know the answer. He asked him the next question. Our guy didn't know the answer. So the examiner was getting really angry. He asked him the third question, and the guy still didn't know the answer. The examiner was now furious and started raking, was shouting, raining insult on him, just telling him how dull he was. In the midst of the rants, the examiner got a phone call. So he suspended the ranting and picked the call. I think the call was from someone that he liked. It was a good conversation. As he finished picking the call, he now asked him the next question. The guy answered. He asked him the second question. This guy answered. He asked him the third question. The guy answered. And the examiner was like, hey, these are the kind of students we want. Not like the one that came before you that didn't know anything. So that was when it now dawned on the guy that he was thinking that I am a different person. He didn't know that it was the same person. And that's how this guy passed. Thank God for that phone call. It redeemed him, because I'm sure that if that phone call had not come in, this guy would have failed entirely. So that's what happens. Sometimes, as I had said earlier, the knowledge is too vast, you wouldn't know anything. And if it's an external examiner, sometimes they cover some syllabus that wouldn't be covered by yours. That happens, and these are some very, very unimportant subjects that might be neglected also, but over time you know that in the course of medical training, and this could be used to fail you. So that was how this man luckily passed the exams. So I don't know if you've had something similar. Let me know in the comment section. Now we move to the last one, and the last one, as I said, is about me. This was still the preclinicals. I don't know, maybe today I'll do another video on clinical ones. It wasn't an exam, it was a test. In med school, tests are very serious because the whole exams, the whole marks you get, and accumulation of your test and your exams. So what happens is that the test usually carries a huge chunk of your marks, I think about 40% or so. So if you fail the test, there are very high chances that you wouldn't pass overall. That's why tests are very serious. When you hear medical students saying that he has tests or she has a test, please, it's our exams. But unlike other courses, the tests are not usually as serious as exams. Our tests are our exams. So it's serious too, because it's a test does not mean that it wasn't serious. And I was being grouped with a particular professor, and in that department then, they didn't have a single professor then. So he was an old lecturer that went somewhere and then came back, so he was still fresh. We really didn't understand him. He had not really taught us a lot, so we didn't understand him, what he likes and the rest. Unlike the other teachers that we had then in that subject. The other teachers too were conducting their examination in different offices, but then we were the unfortunate ones that were grouped with this new professor, and he's a professor, so he knows more than the other people. We're scared, and I noticed that the people that were entering would come out when they were sharing experiences, we notice the man asks difficult questions. So that's when you start praying, God, these other ones with the other examiners are relatively doing well, but we were the doomed ones that were being stuck with this man. But when you hear the patterns of questions, he will start with the simple ones and then move to the more difficult ones. When my time came, I walked in. When I finished greeting him, and yes, please, we don't sit until we're being told to sit. So note that, medical students, note that. Don't sit until you're being told to sit. Even if the seat is welcoming you, don't sit until you're being told to sit, or else you're in trouble. I don't know for other parts of the world, so I still do that till date. As he told me to sit, the first question he asked me was unusually more difficult than the first questions I'd heard other guys mention to me, other guys that went through him. So when he asked me that question, in my mind was like, hey God, I'm in trouble. And the vibe is for like 10 minutes or 15 minutes. That's the longest 10 minutes in your life. You wish for time to fly, and the wait time is so slow. So when he started with that, I was like, I am in soup if I'm starting with this. And the exams usually moves from the easier to the more difficult questions. So if I'm starting with this, I'm doomed. Well, the good thing was that that question I started with was something that I knew very well. So when he asked me for that, he told me to list the hormones found in the adrenal gland. So what I did was, don't worry if you don't understand these things, don't worry about it. The adrenal gland, if you know adrenaline, it comes from the adrenal gland. So yes, that's it. When I was answering, instead of just listing them, okay, this, what I did was that I don't know what entirely knew. That's how God used to work. I told him that the adrenal gland is actually divided into 3 layers. As I named the layers, and then I don't want to bombard you with our medical jargons. And then each layer actually has hormones that it produces. So I now say for the outermost layer, these are the hormones it produces. The intermediate layer, this is it, and then the innermost layer, this is it. When I finished, he told me to name the hormones. I decided to do this. I don't know why I did it. As I finished, the man just told me, okay, that's good. You can go. I was shocked. I was really shocked. Like, it was less than 3 minutes and he told me to go. When I went out, the guys waiting were very shocked. I was like, what happened now? I just told them this was it too. And I was one of the highest in that exam. I think what made him impressed was how I was able to arrange my answers. And that's it in med school. You have to learn to arrange your answers. You have to show that you're thinking strategically. It's not how you produce it. If you do things haphazardly, you would not impress your examiners. You might even irritate them. So showing that you're very organized and orderly. So in the course of preparing for exams, you have to be in the right place mentally. And one thing I knew as a med student, and one thing I did as a medical student was that I ensured that I slept properly before every exam, so that even if I don't read everything, which would never happen, you can't be able to read everything. That must speak for everybody, but somehow you'll be in a good frame of mind to be able to freestyle. So that was it. I was in a good state to be able to arrange my answers, and that saved me. I'm glad that it did. So that's all for these stories. I hope you were able to relate to them if you're not a medical personnel or you're not a medical student. And I hope you enjoyed it. That's how it can be tricky to be a medical student. So know that our exams, our training, easy. So what do you think about the video? Let me know in the comment section below. If you have some experiences you can share, I always respond to all the comments, so I'm going to do that. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like it, don't forget to share it. And if you're yet to subscribe, please subscribe and turn on the bell notification. Thank you, and I'm going to see you in my next video.